So, incredibly, you ended up in court over this apparently cut and dried First Amendment issue.
Actually, we didn't end up in court.
You didn't? That's the word you had.
I think the reason a lot of people think that is because normally it would follow that.
Right.
That would be what you usually think would happen. And also there were some media reports that claimed that we did, even though we didn't.
That's where I got it from then.
Right. You might have gotten from Fox News, actually.
Probably.
Which,
I should never listen to Fox News. What am I thinking?
Right, it's possible. I don't know. But we actually filed a notice of claim, which essentially preserves our right to sue if we have to.
I see.
Right. So we never actually went to court, but we both had lawyers on our side. The only difference was that ours worked for free. They were working pro bono, and the one lawyer that the Board of Education decided they were going to get, and this is public knowledge, so I can say it, they ended up giving him $180,000, even though we never went to court.
Well, that's not a bad day's work.
Right. Well, that's true. It's unfortunate because, I mean, they end up spending all this money, and because it's a public Board of Education, that's not coming from their pockets. That's coming from the town through taxpayer money. So it's unfortunate that they wasted all that on something like that.
Okay, so it didn't end up in court, but obviously it got to a sufficient level that there was a lot of media coverage.
Mm-hmm. Right.
At that point, when the world was watching, what kind of arguments were being used in the media to discuss it? What pros and cons, fors and against? What kind of things were being said?
For the most part, they would address what the arguments of both sides were, and then after that, it usually sounded as if they were siding with us, because it was really very difficult to defend his position, because first there was evidence that he said these things in class, and the law is very clear that you cannot condemn students to hell during class. It just doesn't.
It says that, yeah.
Right. It's fairly clear on that topic, and in addition to that, we then had evidence that the teacher denying making the comments with that meeting in the principal's office. So there was that evidence. There was the evidence that the school board made one move by themselves without taking, this was the only action they took on their own without us forcing them to. And this was during January of that same time. They banned students from recording in the classroom without permission of the teacher. That was their one action. And so to us, and to the rest of the media, they almost made it perfectly clear that they didn't have a problem with what the teacher was doing. They had a problem that I had evidence.
Yeah.
And so, for the most part, the media really reflected a positive light on our part and negative on their side, because it was really difficult to defend all those things that they did.
Yeah, on paper it's hard to see how.
Right. Anywhere it's just
any other
right. There's too much evidence to go against their argument.
Yeah. And the religious right, we've touched on this a little bit. The religious right have done a very good job of linking atheism and secularism, and mixing the two up so that people are kind of suspicious of anyone who wants to keep church and state separate. An atheist, you're against Christians.
Right.
But it's not just atheists or agnostics who'd be offended by this. It'd be other people of other religions, obviously. And did you have anyone contact you from other religious groups, like Jewish groups and Muslim groups, to support you or make any comment publicly?
Right. Well, I had a few individual Muslims who did support me. As far as Muslim groups, no, I didn't. But Jewish groups, I did. Okay. And in fact, there were organizations that we have in the States, such as a group called Americans United for Separation of Church and State, who came out, defended us, and their executive director is a Reverend Barry Lynn, and as part of an agreement that we came to with the Board of Education, he was actually one of 3 speakers that I had called to come to our school and teach the students and the teachers about things like the separation of church and state, and like science. Things like that were fairly important. But yeah, I mean, we had support from all kinds of people, all kinds of groups, and it's great to see that happen.
It must have been nice.
It's great.
It felt like the world must have been going mad otherwise.
Well, right.
Yeah.
Right. And it seemed to be just my town. I mean, there were even what many people consider fairly right-wing groups. I mean, I didn't know too much about the organization, but I looked this one up online called the Rutherford Institute. And their executive director was quoted in the New York Times as basically saying the teacher went way over the line. And so, when you see groups like that who would normally disagree with you on most issues regarding this, to see them on your side is really a positive thing. And I think it's useful to work with that when dealing with these kinds of issues. It's really important.
So, was your town a small town? Was that part of it? Was it a big,
about 40,000, I guess. About 40,000 people. For the most part Christian, but not what we would consider right-wing fundamentalist. As far as general elections are concerned, I don't know how much that shows regarding right-wing Christian, but we were dealing with George W. Bush in 2 elections, so I guess maybe it does a little bit. But it's fairly balanced, it seems, on most accounts. But the only people that were really speaking publicly from my town on this story supported the teacher. Right. And there were even Board of Education meetings where we had about 200 people show up, and almost all of them supported the teacher. Even of course the 7 and 8-year-old children who probably didn't really know why they were there. They were just told, hold up this sign that says Jesus saves or something like that. So that was a little bit unfortunate to see, but I guess that's what people from that idea of we have to instill this in our children. I guess that's something that they do fairly often now. So
well, it's like they say, it's curious how everyone's the same religion as their parents 9 times out of 10.
Very
isn't
often,
it?
Right? Very often.
It's hardly something you found yourself.
Right.
Since this has gone public, do you ever get contacted by students or even people in workplace who've met with a similar situation? Or?
Well, aside from the students who contacted me saying, I remember this teacher and he did that, I didn't hear too much, no. But I know that it happens. In fact, there was a case all the way across the country in California, I think it was the year after, where it was almost the reverse case, where there was a student who was Christian and a teacher who was telling the students that they can't see clearly if they have their Jesus glasses on, which is an interesting reversal, because now it's more like someone who considers himself an atheist to be pushing what on the students. That's what was so interesting about reading that case, is when you're dealing with a situation like that, they're not promoting or pushing a religion. So how do you deal with that? But the only other problem too with that case that I realized actually just yesterday was that in my state we have something called one-party consent. Essentially, one individual can record a meeting or a class session such as the one I experienced, but apparently in California it's not. Apparently it's 2-party consent, and the student recorded the classes, so there may be some legal issues there. But yeah, I know it happens all the time, but usually what happens is students most likely are either just too scared to challenge it, or they don't take it far enough, and they take maybe the first step, but they're too scared to take it any further. And I think that's what's happening at my school right now, because the teacher's still teaching.
He is?
He's still there. Yeah, he's still there. And from what I heard from a few students who will actually speak to me from that school, he went back to doing the exact same thing, but they don't want to challenge it. Their solution is, I'll either just go through the class and just deal with it, or I'll ask to be removed from the class. But they're too scared to deal with it. And it's really unfortunate, because the framework is set up for them to deal with the situation, but they don't want to have anything to do with it.